Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the Cloud Council. You join us today for episode 6, where we're going to be talking about data-led business modernization. And I'm super excited about today's show because we have a super exciting guest, a brilliant and very entertaining gentleman who I will be introducing shortly. But before I do that, let me remind you that, of course, we're coming to you again live. And you can send in your questions, which we will endeavor to answer during the show, to the email address advice@thecloudcouncil.com. So let me introduce my guest. It's Graham Hackland, Group CIO of Rocket Williams Racing. Welcome, Graham. Great to have you.
Thanks, Tom. Really good to be here.
Graham, we spent a lot of time together. I'm so chuffed to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Before we talk about how life's changing for you, give us a bit of an introduction for our viewers into you and life at Rocket Williams Racing.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Graham Hackland. I'm the Chief Information Officer, as Dom said, for the Williams Group, which covers our Formula One team, Heritage team, and our advanced engineering business. I've been in Formula One a very long time. I hate to look at the numbers these days. And I came to Williams in 2014 to help with the digital transformation.
Got it. So let's start today with the big question. So Graham, given the competitiveness in Formula One and the fact that there isn't limitless budget, how do you go about making decisions about what to invest in and what not to invest in?
There's certainly not limitless budget at at Williams, and in fact, I don't think any of the teams do. We talk about the bigger teams, and no one has unlimited budget. I think we all, but certainly the teams that I've worked for and at Williams, we have one very key metric, and you'll often hear this from Formula One people: does it make the car quicker? And that's real. That is a genuine question we ask ourselves. If this thing, this technology, this project is not going to contribute to car performance, then should we do it?
Got it. Any examples, Graham, you can give us where, you've made, the right decisions or the wrong decisions? And I guess, given everything's changing week to week for you, how do you do that in an agile way?
Yeah, I'll give the success first, if you don't mind. We can always come back to the things that maybe we didn't do right. A few years ago, when I came into Williams, Claire and the executive wanted a digital transformation, and for the first time for a while gave IT the support it needed to bring this digital transformation. And one of the things that we talked about was getting the right data into the hands of the right engineer at the right time. And so there are elements of collaboration and mobility in those projects, where we felt that no matter where an engineer was, they needed to be able to access the data securely. So we had to protect the data as well, obviously. So no matter where they were, they needed to be able to access the data and work with it. And it hadn't always been possible. And so we really focused down on that. How can we make sure that voice, video, data that's coming off a car, from a wind tunnel, from a driver simulator, that data can be accessed no matter where people are. And so we started to make a journey towards the cloud, actually. And we really put our bet on the cloud that would give us an elastic capability, because Formula One season is kind of up and down. The design cycle is a bit up and down, and so you don't need, and sometimes you can't afford the peak of your requirements for the whole year. And so cloud really lent itself well, I think, to Formula One. And so we embarked on that journey to really embrace the cloud. It was sold at the time and that it would be cheaper than on premise. I think maybe that's where one of the failures was. I tried not to use that. Even some of the analyst firms that we talked to, part of the ROI and the justification that they were encouraging people to use was that it would be cheaper to use a cloud service than an on-premise. And that's not been my finding, because what the flexibility brings you is really that you just keep consuming more. And so in theory, yes, you can scale back, but how many of us ever do, right? It's all about being able to just keep consuming and not having to outlay all of that capital and taking so much money away from the car to start building data centers and what have you. So yeah, I think part of the success for us was really moving to the cloud, getting that flexibility that we needed for the different parts of our season. So in some parts of the season, race engineering are the most busy. In other parts, aerodynamics are. In other parts, the guys behind the scenes who are working on race engineering, and then we've got to just keep making sure that they've got the right tools at the right time.
Yeah, and I mean, you know us, well, and you hear me preach on this a little bit about the cloud being not a destination, but the way in which you consume, and absolutely agree on your point about it not necessarily cheaper, but it's the flexibility that that you're looking for. And I guess again, you told me about this in terms of funny time for Formula One right now, but being ahead of that because you did. Has really lent itself well for you surviving and transitioning in this time, right?
Well, I'd love to say that we ever thought that we'd send everyone home to work from home, right? Formula One culturally, and I've been around, as I say, since, I said a long time, since '97, so a heck of a long time. Formula One culturally, you were at the site, you were at your desk. If you were at your desk, you were productive, and if you weren't, you couldn't be productive. And as part of our digital transformation, one of the things that Claire Williams wanted was that engineers don't have to be tied to a desk, and so we made that happen in a very small way at first. So we made it so that 8 CAD designers could work away from site, and then slowly we grew that and built it and invested in it. And so maybe more by luck than judgment, when it came the time to send 600 people home to work, we were able to scale up relatively quickly. So within 3 days of the decision being made that we were going to have to switch to our home working, we were able to deliver the scale up that was needed that enabled that. And I think for maybe only the second time in my time at Williams, IT have really been thanked by pretty much everybody universally for how we handled people's ability to step away from their desk and go work from home. The other time was when we moved their email system into the cloud, and they had a much more flexible email system. But yeah, that scale up, wouldn't have been possible if we had on-premise systems and email and a lot of the file storage being on-premise. I don't think we could have scaled up that quickly. It would have taken us a lot longer and a lot more money. So we were able to do it at a very cost-effective way and in a very short space of time. And I think we coped pretty well.
Oh, well, congratulations. And 27 years, 27 years in the industry, and you've only been thanked twice for doing your job. That's terrible. So let's move.
Well, it's like electricity, right? No one walks into a room, switches the lights on, and applauds and goes, "This is brilliant. We've got lights today." It's the same with IT, right? If it's working, you don't expect thanks. I think it's at times when you really go above and beyond that people can then see that you're making that kind of contribution. Most of the rest of the time you get a thanks when you implement something, and then very quickly it's like, and now can you do this and change this and add this functionality? And that's probably why I'm still in Formula One. You're part of this team that is constantly pushing to the edges and to the boundaries of what the technology can offer, because it'll give you a competitive advantage. So yeah, I don't expect to be thanked, but the couple of times it's happened is nice.
So Graham, that's indeed a great segue into best practice. So Williams has a rich history in data management. You've obviously been part of that story for a long time. I know that goes back to Sir Frank and latterly Claire. Give us a bit of history into Williams' adoption of data and some best practice to your CIO, CTO colleagues watching as to how you might embark on a data-led business strategy.
Yeah, I think Formula One for a very long time has been at the forefront of technology, and not just car technology, but really pushing the boundaries. The first data logger in a Formula One car, so the first connected car, was 1979 at Williams. Incredible. 64K data logger, took 20 minutes to download 1 lap of data, so nothing like the real time that we have now. When I came into Formula One, with another team, but 20 years after that, we would get both cars' data onto a floppy disk with a bit of space. So it was probably around a meg, a whole race weekend's worth of data. I've tried to work it out. Not sure I have right, but I think one car will generate more than that just from the start into the first corner of pretty much every race. So the amount of data that I've seen in my time in Formula One has been incredible, but very focused. And this is one of the things that is quite tricky, actually. I think for most of us, for most CIOs, is there's so much data. What's actually valuable? And that's how we approached our data management project as part of this digital transformation. And Williams have been doing it for a long time, and Formula One teams have as well. And every year you'd be adding more and more storage, and you know it would be all about the storage space. And sometimes people couldn't find the data that they needed in a quick enough time frame. I remember being asked in one of my previous teams for some data that was 12 years old that someone remembered was similar to the nose design that had come out 12 years later. And it took us about 9 days to find that data. We'd gone back through hundreds of tapes and recategorizing old tapes that maybe some of the younger CIOs don't know what tapes are, but it was. And by the time we got that data, they'd already rerun the tests in the wind tunnel, made models of this nose, and they no longer needed the data. And that really impressed itself on me. So that's, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago and yeah, probably 15 years ago that happened. And I thought, there's no point having all this data and you can't get it quickly. And so that's been our focus as part of our digital transformation at Williams, understanding with everybody who's a data owner, what's the value of this data that you have? When do you need it? How's it going to be most valuable to you? When does it go, if not end of life, when is it no longer useful? And we've built a tiering structure at Williams so that you're not having to spend huge amounts of money keeping data online on expensive storage that you're never going to touch. And so that tiering allows us, and working with multiple vendors as well. And that's the other tricky thing. I've been around long enough in IT to have heard a vendor say to me, that's not our problem, that's the software vendor, or that's this other hardware vendor that you've got in the mix. I don't see that happening anymore. We work in an ecosystem of partners in our risk space, but also in our infrastructure space where they will work together. We had a cab last week and we made some changes to our infrastructure. And the release manager, I talked to him and said, are you concerned because there's two vendors involved here? Nope. One of them has taken the primary lead, so they are going to lead this with me, and the other has someone on standby ready to contact both of us if we have a problem. So that became a really important thing, having the vendors working together. So if when you're procuring, you go out and you just try to screw the vendor down to the lowest possible price, you're not going to get that kind of service when you need it. So that's been really important for us, that the supplier and the partner management is absolutely critical to making sure that when you come to do something difficult or you're having problems, that they will work with you and that they'll work together. So for me, number one, understanding the value of the data, how long it's valuable for, who needs it and when they need it is critical for a data management project. And then all of the vendors that you have in the mix, because very few of us go with a single vendor, making sure that they're prepared to work together with you.
Well, and I can speak from personal experience, Graham, that has been my experience of working with Williams, very much about partnering and partnerships. So it's absolutely great to see you walk the talk there. So you talked a little bit about potential external conflicts, which is obviously great to hear that doesn't happen. Internal conflict, that point about data and having access to it or not and tiering it. How do you manage conflicts where you, let's say, might have an engineer who's very demanding about having access to data going back 25 years? How do you deal with those kind of demands internally?
A demanding engineer, is there such a thing? I think maybe we're lucky compared to some industries. I mean, obviously there are demanding people, and there are some people. If you say to them, as part of this data management, so how long do you need to keep this data? The answer will be forever. But in our technical leadership, we have some really brilliant people, and they understand the need to balance the money that we would spend on keeping everything available forever, and the fact that they want to hire another designer or hire an aerodynamicist or put some innovative part on the car or add a package of upgrades to the car for an extra race in that year. So that's the kind of trade-offs that they are making. So it's not like IT has to go and say, you can't have this because there's not enough storage. They are making those decisions. So we have an IT steering group that is led by the leadership of the organization, and they will help to shape what we work on, when we work on it, but also questions like this: how long should we keep data for? How do we make sure that we're not scrapping anything that's subsequently needed? And if we do, what's the balance between a piece of data that's been generated by a rig and rerunning that job on the rig? Maybe sometimes it's quicker if it's a 4-hour job, you just run it again. Instead of keeping all of the data that it generated. So we don't actually keep all the data that we generate as an organization. And it's very difficult to work out what to flush and what to keep. The vast majority is kept, but especially in aerodynamics, they are very prudent about what is actually valuable to keep, what can they flush and rerun the job at some point in the future. So yes, you do get people who say, I want to keep everything forever. But I think it's much more pragmatic than that. And having strong leadership in the organization is really important. It's never about IT against the organization, and all the conversations I hear about, IT need to be aligned to the organization. I've been fortunate to work in a true team environment, right, in a sport. And so you are all part of the team. No one in IT should be doing anything for their own sake. It's all about making the car go faster, like we talked about earlier.
Got it. Makes sense, Graham. And so good time, I think, to move to now the opportunity. So you've been collecting data now since 1979. You got a lot of it. Some of it you've got rid of onto tapes, which, by the way, I do know what tapes are, for the record.
We no longer, just for the record, we no longer rely on tape. I just want to get that out there.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm really glad to hear that.
We have a partnership with
you've got the data, I guess, in your
everything in the cloud. So
everything in the cloud. So in your business, I guess it's kind of obvious why you use the data and what you use it for to get competitive advantage. What other opportunities do you see, in Rocket Williams, but also, to our viewers in terms of how they can extract value from the data and get competitive advantage in their industries?
So the car data, most people when they think of Formula One think of car telemetry data. That data is actually really small. That's not where the vast majority of our data is. So of the terabytes of data that we generate over a season, a very small percentage of that is actually car telemetry data. There's a lot of video and a lot of analytics data that we're working on, and data that's moving between wind tunnel, driver simulator, vehicle, the science and technology groups, and then into the racing car, and then that loop back feed back to them to help continually develop the car. So for most CIOs I talk to, that's quite different to their business and the way that they operate, except that everybody has data that's really critical to how their organization operates. And so it doesn't matter whether it's being generated in real time by a Formula One car and you've got to move it around the world. But I mentioned earlier that I'm also group CIO, so Williams Advanced Engineering is a really important part of our organization and what we do. So we take Formula One derived technology and we apply it to lots of other industries. And so we've put technology into hospitals that protect babies. We help Brompton with an electric bicycle. We've done electric versions of motor vehicles using the technology from Formula One. We did the batteries for the first few seasons in the Formula E, the electric series. We've worked with aerospace. We work in fridges, putting technology into refrigerators. We've helped to make ice creams more efficiently, soap powder. So we apply that knowledge, thermodynamics, aerodynamics, lightweight materials, and especially electrification, and we've applied that into lots of other industries. Now that's quite different. That data and how you handle it is quite different. In Formula One, 4 or 5 seasons usually, and almost 99.999% of the time, no one cares about the data after 5 years. They want it there, but then they're not really going back to look at it very much. When you start to work on road cars or technology that's going into fridges and supermarkets or into hospitals, that data is different. And sometimes we own the IP. Sometimes it's IP that we develop jointly with another organization. Sometimes it's their IP that they give to us to work on in that project. Now we've got to track and trace and make sure that we know where that IP is, where that data is, how it's being used, and if ever in the future we have to be able to show the whole history of that piece of IP that's been generated. We've got to be able to do that. So now you're talking about tamper-proof repositories and making sure that data can't be tampered with at all, so that you've got the whole proof of origin of what it is. For Formula One, that's 1-2 seasons maybe. If ever there was an investigation into something that happened at a race, it's likely to happen within a couple of seasons. And I think that's probably more applicable to the challenges that a lot of other CIOs are facing. So we take projects from all these different industries that I've mentioned, including defense, and we have rules and regulations that the customers will put on us, and we need to make sure that we can comply with that. So that's been quite a different model for us, and we've had to be much more flexible in the infrastructure we've built, that we can segment the network so that there's a piece of the network that's just for one customer, for their infrastructure, for their data, and that no one else can get to it. If our wind tunnel has a customer in it, and then the next week it's got a Formula One car in it, we need to be able to handle that wind tunnel and the infrastructure and the data differently. And that's probably more applicable to what others are doing. And so then it's about making sure that the right people have got the access to the data at the right time, and very importantly, those who are not allowed to access to that data can't get access to the data. And that's very similar to the challenges faced by so many other organizations. And sometimes that data is in the cloud.
Yeah, I get no, absolutely. And I guess what's even more challenging is you've got these two speeds where you've got one, you've got one scenario for racing, you've got another scenario for advanced engineering, you've got different, data policies associated with those two. So it's, as you say, segmenting the network.
Although sometimes advanced engineering is at real pace, right? So they'll bid for a project or come up with an innovation, and in 3 days' time, we want to spin up a project team and we want to build a prototype. And so we can operate at Formula One speed in our advanced engineering organization. Some of the projects are long-term, but some of them need that very rapid response. And that's why some of the big OEMs, car manufacturers will come to Williams, is because they know that we can operate at Formula One speed.
And next time I take an ice cream out of my freezer, I'll think of Williams Advanced Engineering.
Yeah, and thermodynamics, and how to make sure that every ice cream that comes off the assembly line has the same amount of chocolate and has been cooled the same way.
Great. So, hey, Graham, I've got a couple of questions in from the viewers here that I'm going to share with you here. This one relates to where we started about spend.
Yeah.
So the question is, it must be hard to get the team to spend on IT when racing is expensive. What advice do you have for winning an investment case?
Yes, and this is where it comes back to, we talked a little around ROI. So if I wanted some money to buy a drone and play with a drone around our factory in Grove, and because I thought it would be a really cool thing to do, or maybe there's a new weather station that we might want to put at the track and see whether we can get more accurate weather information, but the odds of it delivering are relatively low because it's new technology and we don't know, or it's just something for fun like a drone. I'm not even going to ask for that. Never mind, I'm not going to get the funding. So the only time we go for funding approval is when we've satisfied ourselves within the project team, and the project team will include people from IT and people from the part of the organization that are making the request, are satisfied that it will contribute to car performance. And look, so sometimes that's things that are not that obvious. It could be a well-being project within HR, because if our people are well and are happy and are able to operate, then they are going to contribute to car performance. So it's not just as simple as, if this is a piece of carbon fiber, then it will contribute to car performance. There are a lot of projects that we do around business continuity or risk avoidance, around people, because the two biggest assets I think any organization have are their people and their data. And so making sure that people can be happy at work and can operate is just as important as buying the next gadget or whatever, and making sure that people have an appropriate device to work on. And if you're sitting in front of a computer for 12 hours doing design work, we want them to be as comfortable in the 11th and 12th hour as they were in the first hour. So, but that's how we build the business case. And so it's been very focused. And I used to talk about, when we apply for funding, we're taking money away from the car, but actually I've changed my thinking. We're actually making a contribution to the car. So it may be that the decision is, we're not going to buy these brakes. We're going to instead buy this piece of software that's a new strategy system that we're going to develop. but because there's a trade-off. Both of those things will bring performance to the car. One we think is going to bring 0.1 of a second, and the new strategy system is going to get us 2 seconds because we'll be able to get our pit stops right, or we'll be the fastest pit crew and we'll be able to overtake 2 people. So actually, we're not taking money away from the car. We're making an intelligent decision based on what's going to add the most performance to the car. And I know that's tricky for a lot of organizations, right? So it might feel like it's easy for Formula One. You've got a Formula One car, that's your focus. When I talk to CIOs, I say to them, "What's your equivalent of making the car quicker? What's your There's so many things that CIOs have to think of, but what's your mission? What's your company's ultimate goal? What are you trying to do? You're trying to get to market in a certain speed. There are things that you can equate to making the car go quicker. Focus your money on those things, and you'll get board approval when you can show in their language that you are making a contribution to whatever their equivalent of make the car quicker is."
Yeah, it's a great analogy. I will remember it. One other question here. I know this one is close to your heart, Graham. What tips do you have for sectors or businesses that may not appeal to STEM candidates to get them to reconsider your industry?
Yeah, so in Formula One, that has been an issue, especially around diversity, right? So let's cards on the table. Bringing young women into engineering, has been tricky, and Formula One is seen as a male-dominated sport, and that is changing. And for Williams, and one of the things I'm personally passionate about, but certainly for Williams, we want the best people in our organization. We are going to win by bringing the best people in. And often it means going into a school and inspiring the young women in that school. We have some amazing female leadership in our organization. And every now and then we ask them to talk about what it's like for them, what Formula One's like. You see the engineer sitting on the pit wall, or the driver. We have no female drivers in Formula One at the moment. At Williams, we have a female driver in our roster, but there are no drivers driving the races at the moment in Formula One. And that will come, I think, because young female drivers are getting opportunities now. The W Series came along, which really raised the profile of at least 10 of the leading female drivers in that series now have regular races in other sports. But for a young girl in a school, perhaps being the driver is not the thing that they want to do. And I'll give you a personal example. So my oldest daughter spent a week at Williams on one of these taster programs that we have. So we have about 1,000 young people come through our factory every year. Not this year with what's going on, but they come through our factory and they get to experience all different aspects of it. And this taster week is every day you spend a day in a different department. So she got to be in the clean room making carbon fiber. She got to be in the wind tunnel and making parts for the model. And she spent a day in procurement. And every day, when we were driving home, I was asking what her favorite was. And at the end of the week, I said, "What was your favorite day?" And she actually said it was the day she spent in procurement. She said, "Because when I watched the Canadian Grand Prix, the carbon fiber that's being used on that car, today I bought that carbon fiber." And that, again, just really impressed upon me the role that every single person in the team plays, for what we do, for going racing. And so there is a place for everyone. And that's the really important thing. You don't have to be someone who wants to sit on the pit wall, because again, there's only 4 engineers sitting on the pit wall. There are so many people in a Formula One team in so many different roles that make a contribution to that Formula One car. I'm really proud of the group that we've got in IT and across the whole organization of young people who are really passionate about technology. Because I think if you love technology, Formula One is an amazing environment to be operating in, because it doesn't stand still. Every year we're totally reinventing ourselves, trying new technology, adapting, and so we put a lot of time and effort into finding the best people, growing the best people from the ground up. And so STEM is really important to us at Williams, and we do our best to encourage and to make opportunities for young women, young men, get the best people regardless.
Great, Graham. And that's a great segue into the next section, which is today's takeaway. And I'm going to ask you about STEM, given, again, you pioneered this in F1. What's the impact been for you in terms of performance and what you're seeing in terms of engagement and the culture from putting that focus into STEM?
It absolutely pays dividends for us. We are getting the best people into Formula One. There's lots of other industries that are there, from aerospace, other automotive. What they're doing in retail, is amazing. Pharma, we're competing with them, and we're also competing with other sports. Some of them, are becoming very technical and data driven. Where you would think football, rugby, is just people on a field kicking a ball. Actually, there's so much data now. So the data scientists and the data analytics there, as we move into AI, seeing what artificial intelligence could bring to Formula One, decision making being made by an AI engine rather than a human. I'm really looking forward to when that happens. And being the young person who gets to code that and who's working on that. We're working on autonomous car programs through Williams Advanced Engineering, all sorts of interesting technology. And I think that's it. It shows so I've always been passionate about bringing technology to very complex challenges. And I still see that today, and a lot of the young people that I work with, that we talk to, that we hopefully we inspire to take up these kind of technology challenges, whether it's in Formula One or other industries. But it's really important to get people who are keen, passionate, and we drive that out of them by making them work 40 hour, 50, 60, 70, 80 hour weeks
Yeah, you
in the racing season.
Hey, let me ask you. I'm going to ask you for one more, Graham, which is maybe self-serving. I've got 3 daughters. I love that story about your daughter doing the rotation. For those watching, any girls out there and daughters of viewers, if they'd be interested in participating in that program when as you say, the factory opens up again, how would they go about that, Graham?
HR@williamsf1.com. So if you email HR@williamsf1.com. So here's a tip, right? And this comes from our HR director, Nicola Salter, who I said to her, I did one of these STEM talks at a girls' school, and I was like, she should be doing this, not me. But anyway, I was there because of the technology, and I said, okay, what should I tell them? How are they going to get a place at Williams? And she said to me, look, we get thousands of applicants. So what are you going to say as a young person that makes you stand out? So if you are the captain of your sporting team, if you are doing any of these other programs, anything you're doing around leadership, if you're sitting at home on the Xbox all day, you may not get onto the program, but then you may because you may be appropriate in our driver simulator if you can code and drive, and you might be able to help us with the simulator. But yeah, to get on the program, think about when you write in what sets you apart from others, and that can be difficult for young people, right? They don't want to stand out. They don't want to be seen to be different. But then you come across these young people that you can see. I sat at a table, and groups of 4 girls came, and I showed them some of the Formula One parts and what we were doing. And there were some groups that just sat there, and they clearly had no interest in what I was talking about. And there were probably 3 or 4 groups. Maybe 9 or 12 girls in that school who were exceptional and who I thought would be, amazing. If I knew, we would be able to hire them, who were engaged, who were interested, who thought about the challenges that we had, and how they could be involved. And so, yeah, I think that if you're going to apply at any Formula One team, remember there's, what is it in the UK, 7 or 8 teams. There's only 7 or 8 who do the role I do. It's a limited number. You've got to stand out, and very often it's not about your technical knowledge and which school you went to. I mean, I don't think I've ever hired anyone based on the university they went to or the school that they went to or necessarily the grades they got. But it's when I sit down and talk to them, it's that passion about wanting to be involved and solve complex challenges. That's what makes them stand out. So yeah, talk about the things that you do that will make you stand out. You're a volunteer at Parkrun, or you do things outside of school. We want people who are rounded, who've got wide experience.
Got it. Brilliant, Graham. Well, fascinating experience, I'm sure, for many girls. So, hey, that brings us to a conclusion here, Graham. My takeaway from a fascinating conversation is, for everyone watching, think about what is your equivalent of does it make the car go faster? So thank you, Graham, again. Always a
Thanks,
pleasure
Josh.
to spend time with you and a privilege to have half an hour of discussion on this important topic. Just a reminder to our viewers that today's discussion and advice will be shortly available as an article and on-demand videos at nutanix.com/CXO, where you can you can also see previous Cloud Council episodes. And join me again next week at the same time, same place, when I'll be joined by Graham Watt, the CEO of Softcat, for invaluable advice around workplace computing. So thank you again, Graham. Thank you to my viewers for joining us today. Look forward to seeing you at the same time, same place next week. And until then, keep well and keep safe.